Hi, it's Michael Lennox, and today I'm going to be talking about why I think TIG isn't a great option for beginners. Plenty of you have asked about TIG in the comment section of some of my videos, so I'm going to express my opinion. As you know, I really like stick, but I don't think I mentioned this. I actually really like TIG as well, even though I kind of suck at it. I've only TIG welded a handful of times in my life, but this is because of my point, not despite it. Even though I'm not that proficient in TIG welding, I still know a lot about it. And before I get the millionth comment about me being really sweaty, it's something like 45 degrees in my shop. I'm not on any drugs.
I just took some ecstasy. Ain't no telling what the side effects could be.
Probably the first and biggest reason is expense. TIG is far more expensive both to buy and to run than stick or MIG welding. Stick in particular. Hi, VoiceOver Mike here. So my camera decided to stop recording right in one of the most important parts of the video. Let's compare the price of about apples to apples basic stick setup to TIG setup. For a basic stick setup, all that's necessary is the stick machine, the rods, and a chipping hammer. However, for a basic TIG setup, you're gonna need a machine, a gas bottle, a regulator, tungstens, filler metal, acetone, a wire brush, a back cap, a collet body, a gas lens, a head gasket, and an insulator. You can see why it makes a lot more sense just to start with stick. The second reason is complexity of learning and difficulty to really understand TIG welding. Especially if you start with MIG, it's very difficult to grasp the concept of the arc length, the feeding hand, what to do, how to feed the wire, the speed you go at, just the precise movements of TIG. It can be very difficult to get it on your belt. It takes a lot of time and patience to really learn how to properly TIG weld. Now, there are people who I know who went straight to TIG welding and are now pretty good TIG welders, but for the rest of us, that's not really going to be an option. I think it makes way more sense to just learn on a stick welder first. The third reason, TIG is mighty slow. As hobbyists, we don't have all day to keep welding, and we have other stuff to take care of, like our families. Maybe you have children, you have other responsibilities. We want to get our stuff done. If this weld is going to take forever to make, it's going to be really annoying, and we might just not end up welding, which is the point of this anyway. Stick welding is way faster, and MIG is even faster than that because of the increased deposition rate. Now, in this relatively affordable price range, unless you're looking to get a water cooler, which you aren't, I can tell, you're gonna end up with a product that doesn't really have a great duty cycle. Not particularly the welder. In TIG, you're often limited by the gun because it's so small. Most of you will be starting with a product like this, which is limited to about 120 amps. This kind of gun can get very uncomfortable to hold because it's just gas cooled. This is why I ended up buying this TIG torch, which cost over 5 times as much as this TIG torch. This cost about $500, whereas this one cost about 80 or something like that. This TIG torch can handle, I believe it's 100% duty cycle for 250 amps, and I've seen people using these upwards of 300 amps, so I'm pretty much set. If you wanted to know, this is a heavy hitter TIG rig, flex head 250 amp torch. Next up is tungsten. Now, you'll be going through a lot of tungsten when you just start out. Now, if you didn't know, instead of having a steel electrode that burns down, with TIG, you have a non-consumable tungsten electrode and you feed wire with your other hand. But if the tungsten electrode even touches the weld pool, you're gonna have to stop welding, take it out, and grind it back down again. This is unbelievably annoying. You will go through a lot of tungsten when you just start out, and these are very expensive. Where I am, don't comment in the comments.
Sure, where I am, TIG only costs $1 per electrode.
Here it costs about $5 an electrode. Next up, number something, is the amperage that you can weld at. TIG welders tend to be a lot more limited when it comes to amperage. Not in terms of absolute amperage, they tend to be about the same as stick welders, but what you can do with the amperage is much different. Most stick welding requires about 125 amps for the most common rod, whereas with TIG welding, 125 amps will get you way less far in terms of material thickness. This means if you want to weld a comparable thickness of steel, you're going to need a lot more amps. The same number of amps will get you a lot further in stick welding than TIG welding. On heavy gauge, large diameter pipe welding, stick welding is used at about 130, 140 amps, whereas TIG welding is used in the 300s. With TIG, you're pretty much limited to very thin bits of metal, unless you want to buy a very high quality welder that can go into the higher amperages and get a gun that can handle it. Whether you want to buy a water cooler, rig up your own janky water setup, or just not weld at higher amperages. On to the next point. TIG requires a lot of stuff happening at the same time and takes up both of your hands. When you're tacking something, it can be very nice having a free hand to be able to hold the bit you're tacking. With TIG, you have to hold the gun and the rod and take up one of your feet using the pedal if you're using some sort of high frequency start. It can be very frustrating trying to tack things with TIG. You end up having to just use MIG or just tack without filler, which isn't a great idea. On to the next point. TIG requires very clean material in order to weld. You can stick weld through pretty much everything if you have the right electrode. MIG is more fussy, but it's far less. Next point, TIG requires very clean material. With stick welding, if you have the right electrode, you can pretty much weld through anything. MIG is more fussy, but it's way less fussy than TIG. TIG requires no mill scale, no grease, no oil, no dust. You have to wipe down both the rods and the material with acetone or degreaser or something before you start. Be careful with that. Do some research if you want to use degreaser. It can be dangerous. If you're a homeowner or a hobbyist, you don't really want a lot of hassle. And a lot of the parts we have to weld are outside, or they're rusted, or they're parts of cars which haven't been taken care of that well. You're going to spend hours grinding away at material to get to weldable material. And you're going to have to wipe everything down. It is such a hassle welding with TIG. And everything has to be very precise. This brings me to my next point. You can't weld outside. Even a slight breeze can blow away the shielding gas, exposing the freshly molten metal to atmospheric contaminants. This can lead to hydrogen embrittlement and the oxidation of the weld, leading to a weld that isn't strong. This can be extremely frustrating if you want to weld outside. A lot of the stuff that hobbyists and homeowners have to work on is somewhere in their property where you can't bring a building to surround it. On to my final point. TIG is very complex in terms of the stuff you need and replacing parts. There's just so much that goes into it. I consider myself a pretty simple guy. I don't like a lot of hassle, but there's so many components to a TIG gun and little things that you can change and all these specific part numbers. This is one reason why I really like stick. There's an electrode, there's a stinger, and there's amperage. Nothing else to worry about. With TIG, you have all the components of the gun. Maybe the pedal, the high frequency, the regulators, the gas. You can tell just how exhausting this process can be of trying to decide what to get. And these parts also are pretty expensive to replace. This is why I steer clear of TIG. When I can stick weld something, I will. If I need to TIG weld it, I'll TIG weld it. A lot of people I know either want to get into TIG welding or recently purchased a TIG welder and suddenly are so overwhelmed with all the different complex part names and numbers that they're completely lost. This is what I call paralysis by analysis. There's so much you can focus on, whereas it's so much easier to just remove all the complexity. And that's precisely why I love stick welding so much. Now, in this video, I'm not bashing TIG. I love TIG. I just don't think it's the right choice for hobbyists, especially when you're starting. Once you can get a grip on TIG welding, you are set. TIG has so many uses and can be a real lifesaver in a headache. In my opinion, generally, I think TIG should be saved for machine shops, or once you've spent a couple years welding. If you're going to take anything away from this video, I recommend only buying TIG if you absolutely need it.